Okay.
Okay, I want to welcome everybody to our October office hours. And we are going to go over a few things that maybe some people will think are redundant or they know that, but we have gotten several calls or emails about certain things. So I think there's some confusion out there on a few things, but like we always do, we will take questions at the end and answer on the fly. So okay, Dee Dee, do you want to bring up the agenda? Okay, adoption and rejection of ETR and IEP. That's going to be talking about if you reject the ETR, must you reject the IEP? Expired ETR, open enrolled student evaluations. There's a difference between school age and preschool. Alternate assessment basic score. There's been a little confusion about that, and we'll go over what that is. How to list co-taught in Section 7, and read aloud accommodations. So when we enroll a student and are transferring ETR, IEP, if we reject the ETR, but the IEP is good, must we reject it too? And the answer is no. And I'm going to let Dee Dee take it from there.
Okay, thanks, Helen. So this slide that you are seeing is pulled directly from ODE's EMIS presentation. And this is part of the strategic plan, obviously going through 2024, but this is their exact language. So we have gotten a lot of questions around if we reject the ETR and we are going to conduct a new evaluation, but the IEP is current and there's nothing wrong with it, do we have to reject the IEP as well? And the answer to that, as Helen already said, is no. And the reason is, as you can see here, this first bullet point, that when you are accepting and adopting or rejecting an ETR or an IEP, and it doesn't matter if it's within state or out of state, you are looking at those records independent of one another, which means the condition of one has no bearing on the condition of the other. So you can have an ETR that is acceptable and you're going to use it, and you could have a terrible IEP that you're going to reject and amend or write a new one, and vice versa. You can reject the ETR, but still adopt and accept the IEP. So as I said, these are independent of one another. And this is not a question, but we get this a lot too. And so I'll just throw in for free today that some folks are confused and think that anytime you do a reevaluation, that automatically means that you have to rewrite a new IEP, even if the IEP still has 7 months left in its life and is okay, it is adequate. And that's simply not true. What you must do is the team must consider the information in the new ETR and determine if that new information impacts the IEP as it sits, and if it needs amended. And it very well may need, a simple amendment in a couple of spots, or if it needs a complete overhaul. Generally speaking, unless there's been a huge shift in a student's needs, there's generally not a need to rewrite the IEP, but it very well may need amended, just a little bit of tweaking. So the requirement is that you consider that information, that new information, and make that decision. There is no requirement that you have to write a new IEP. So again, that was just bonus information because that really wasn't part of our question list today. But since we're talking about ETR and IEP, we just wanted to throw that in there. All right, so and that kind of leads to another question that we thought we had talked about this a lot last year to get the word out because there was a change, but we've still had a few questions arise this year as well about expired ETRs and how you code the reevaluation. And this is a change that went into effect last year. And if you were with us in our SPED forum, I think we may have even talked about it in our office hours last year, but there was clear guidance that had been given several years ago by an individual from ODE. And we had it in writing and we had the dates and everything, and it went out in this part of the state. And it was very specific about what to do if it was expired and it was in Ohio, what to do if it was expired and it was out of state, if it was transfer, all of those kinds of things. There continued to be confusion around other parts of the state. And so we went back to ODE and said, okay, what's up, guys? Because we're getting conflicting reports and we're finding out that there are other SSTs who are giving conflicting guidance from what we're giving. And we've got this in writing. And apparently there was some misinformation that was given. The same guidance was not given in the northern part of the state that was given in the southern part of the state. So OEC came out hard and fast last year. Everybody's on the same page. This is what we're doing. It does not matter if it's expired by a day or if it's expired by 5 years. Doesn't matter if it's in state, out of state. Anytime there's an expired ETR, it is coded as an initial. I'm not going to lie and say that we love that. I have my own opinion about it. I don't really like that we're doing it, but we know that's what they want. So that is the guidance. And, obviously, unless that changes, which I do not anticipate, they are all coded as an initial. I have had a few folks ask, well, what does that mean then in terms of response to intervention or the requirement to talk about interventions that are provided. When it's a reeval, you would usually say no interventions beyond what's dictated in the IEP are provided as the IEP is adequate to meet the student's needs, something of that nature. You can still do that. It's simply a matter of coding. So from that standpoint, you're still treating it sort of as a reeval, but you are coding it as an initial. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. Okay, the next thing that we want to talk about is that open enrollment. And as Helen mentioned, there is a little bit of a difference between what we do for school age versus what we do for preschool. So we're going to explain both of those, but we get a lot of questions around what happens when we open enroll students, and then we determine that there's a disability or there's a suspicion, etc. So you've open enrolled a student and then determine there's a need for an evaluation. The question is, do you have to get consent from the district of residence? And the answer to that is no, because when you accept an open enrolled student, your district assumes full responsibility for her education, including the evaluation and including delivery of services if the child is eligible. So therefore, you do not need to get the resident district's consent. However, you do have to invite them to the meetings. I will tell you that 9 out of 10 times they don't attend. They're not going to show up. That's usually what happens. You invite them, they don't come, but you should still send afterward a copy of the ETR and the IEP. Now, here's the big disclaimer on what I just said. That is the rule for school age. When you open enroll school age students, you assume all responsibility for them. That is different from preschool. So within the last couple of years, regulations shifted for preschool around a lot of different things. One of those things was the no boundaries regulation. So now preschool students can freely attend any preschool program. It does not have to be within the area in which they live. So because of that, there is no such thing as open enrollment for preschoolers unless they're already identified with a disability. So in that case, if you have a preschooler attending your preschool who is not from your district, and they don't have to be, it is not considered open enrollment. They're just attending your preschool. So if there's a referral to be made, it would in fact go back to the district of residence, who would have to evaluate, it's their responsibility, and make an offer of FAPE. Having said that, that district of residence may choose to contract with you as the quote unquote open enrollment district and allow you to conduct the evaluation. But bear in mind again, that responsibility still lies with the district of residence. If you come to some agreement and they contract with you, that's fine, but ultimately responsibility still lies at the feet of the district of residence, because that is not technically an open enrollment case. All right, Helen's gonna walk us through some really encouraging news for a change. Hooray about alternate assessment.
Okay, and I do want to say, if anybody has, any questions while we're going through this, please feel free to put them in the chat or even unmute and ask, previous to what Dee Dee was talking about and from this and on. So alternate assessment update. And I know why this has been a little confusing, because we had a competency score of 500. And then now for the class of 2023 and beyond, students who score anywhere in the basic range, and we don't have the numbers to tell you what the basic range is, at least not at this point. The information on the test should say basic, and I'm assuming it gives a number it used to in the past. And I did talk with one psych who told me it said passed, and she was questioning it because it was basic. So right now, or like Dee Dee said, good news. And I have a few ideas of why this happened, but anybody in 2023 and beyond, whether they get a competency score of 500 or not, if they get a, not competency, the proficiency was 500. If they get a competency score anywhere in the basic range, they do not require remediation or retesting. Yay. And also, if those students get basic on science or social studies, they automatically earn the corresponding state seal, meeting the readiness requirement for graduation. So they would get the seal for science and the seal for social studies, which helps many of our low incident students be able to earn seals, because as we all know, you cannot be excused from the consequences of not obtaining a seal. Anybody have any questions? Because we have gotten a few, like, okay, but it says 500. We're kind of looking at, which is kind of, well, it's kind of odd to say, and like, well, competency is overriding that 500 score. So basically I would be looking at if they're in the basic range, yay, no remediation and retesting. And that would have been for ELA and math. And they earn 2 seals.
Right. And the only thing I would add, Helen, is we just want to stress, as Helen said, there's a little bit of confusion because we used to talk about they had to score proficient, which was that 500. But now basic, anything in the basic range, even if it's the lowest score in the basic range, what we want to stress is that is considered passing. So that now is the proficient. So Helen and I kind of were laughing yesterday saying, well, the whole 500 proficient score is kind of a moot point now. We don't know if they'll do away with that language or not. They may, we don't know that yet. But the reality is basic has now become proficient for all intents and purposes, because it now means they have passed, which is, again, great news. And that is especially important for the requirement of ELA and math for graduation and the SEALs. We were really excited to hear that news.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say, I don't know what the competency is, and if they're following just graduation guidelines of the readiness, the whatever, but I did email Wendy Stoika again to confirm that even if they did not have a 500 on the proficiency, if they scored basic in the competency, they're passed and they get this 2 seals. So we'll keep you informed. Like I said, it it is kind of a moot point, and to me that a little, I mean, I'm very glad they did this, but I don't know why we have a 500 score anymore, but not for me to decide. So, okay.
And Helen shared a great example, which really makes us very confident in that it won't be too confusing for folks once the word is out, because as she said, a psych contacted her and it did actually show on the student's test. It actually said passed, even though the student scored in the basic range. So that's, that's confirmation for people. So if you get those questions from your testing coordinators or your guidance counselors or your psychs, you can rest assured that yes, those students are passed when they get that basic range.
Yeah, because we don't ever see the scores. I happen to see the scores because I have a nephew that has autism, and my sister-in-law always asks me what it means and how it compares to other students and whatnot. So that's really the only time I've seen any scores. Or Dee Dee, we don't have access to that, maybe in our past life, but anyhow, I think we're okay with that. Okay, can we still list both teachers under SDI if it's a co-taught classroom? And I know we had a lot of discussion about this in the past, and it's gone back and forth, and we're going to give you our answer at this time. And we'll see, if there's anything else that changes, like we say, as of today.
Good point, Helen. Yeah, so as most of you know, there was a time when we used to tell you a couple of years ago, even we used to say that you could list both teachers in the same box under SDI when it was a co-teaching situation. But the clarification that we got a few years ago, I think it was the year before last, where there was a huge push to list the gen ed teacher under support for school personnel. We even went back and clarified with OEC, does that apply to co-teaching as well? And they have said, yes, it does. Again, we really want to stress, please, please, please hear this important caveat. This does not mean that the general education teacher isn't providing some of those SDI minutes the same as the intervention specialist. This is simply a matter of how it's listed on the IEP. And every time we're doing training and in our Canvas course on Beyond Compliance IEP, we stress this emphatically when we get to Section 7, that it is not a change in the delivery of service. It is not a change in who provides the instruction. We are not saying that gen ed teachers cannot and should not, because they should be providing some of those SDI minutes. They should be delivering specially designed instruction. It's just a matter of how it's formally broken out into the IEP. Because if you think about it this way, it makes a lot of sense. Because I will tell you that when this first rolled out, we weren't happy about it and we were opposed to it until OEC was able to explain the rationale and the why behind it and make it so that it was very clear, and then we were on board. So the rationale is this, and you may have heard us say this before, but it doesn't hurt to say it again. We would not expect a gen ed teacher to be solely responsible for delivering specially designed instruction without any support or guidance or collaboration with an intervention specialist. That doesn't mean they can't deliver it, but they at least at minimum need some consultation with an intervention specialist. It always makes sense for students to get, especially as they get into higher grades where the content becomes much more complex and nuanced. I'm an intervention specialist, and so is Helen. I am not a specialist in algebra. I am not an expert or a specialist in American government or any other, specific content area. I'm an expert in how to adapt and provide interventions and, reteach and think about multiple ways of presenting information so that students with disabilities understand it and can make progress. That's my area of specialty. The content specialist, which is the gen ed teacher, is the specialist in the content area. So it makes sense for them to provide specially designed instruction, and they should be. However, we would not expect them to do that for students with disabilities without any connection to an intervention specialist, because that's their area of expertise. And so even though that's always been what has happened, how it's been taking place out in real life in schools, it wasn't really reflected that way in the IEP. There was some confusion. And so in changing this, what Ohio did was really come in line more with what it looks like federally and what it looks like in other states, where the intervention specialist is the only person who can be listed as the person responsible for SDI. That doesn't mean that they're the one delivering it. It means they're the one overseeing it, in that they're providing that support to the gen ed teacher to give them strategies and to collaborate with them about the needs of each individual student. And that's why you have to have the gen ed teacher listed under support for school personnel, and you make the statement about how they're going to receive support and collaboration and conferencing or whatever it is, co-planning, however you want to say it, but they're going to get that support from the intervention specialist, who is the expert in serving students with disabilities. So that's why we break it out. So just wanted to, again, kind of walk through the why and the how of what that looks like. The thing we want you to remember is that where you can say co-taught is in the location box. So you're still making it very clear in section 7 that the student is in a co-taught classroom. You're just no longer putting both teachers' names under SDI. You're breaking it out: intervention specialist under SDI, gen ed teacher under support for school personnel. But in the location, you're still writing co-taught classroom there.
And it's the same, if you think about it, it's the same, because that came up quite a few years ago with CODAs and PTAs. CODAs and PTAs are often the ones that are doing the hands-on, but they cannot change the script. So SDI is either the PT or the occupational therapist, and the PTA and the CODA go in support for school personnel. Obviously, they are doing a lot of hands-on, but under the direction. They do not change the script or however it's set up by the PT or occupational therapist.
Great example, Helen. And the same is true for our paraprofessionals. They may be actually providing some instruction. They're overseeing guided practice. They may be doing some reteaching or some, pre-teaching of vocabulary or whatever it is, but they are still doing it under the direction of the teacher. So the teacher is listed under SDI, obviously, and the para is under support for school personnel. All are great examples of the same philosophy of why now gen ed and intervention specialists are separated out. It's the same philosophy. And I see we have a hand raised, so I'm going to pause because it looks like Jennifer has a question. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, I just had a quick question about the big yellow box in the middle. One of the things that we have been told is that Gen Ed or resource room were our settings. And so we had gone away from the co-teach classroom because they didn't consider that a setting. So I just wanted to check on that.
Yeah, it's still acceptable to list that. What you would do is say both. So if it is a Gen Ed classroom, but it's co-taught, you can put Gen Ed classroom co-taught. Does that make sense?
Sure, thank you.
And obviously, if it's a resource room, it's generally not co-taught. So you're just putting, resource room. So yes, that's a very good point. We're just simply saying that you can say that in addition to saying Gen Ed classroom, you can say co-taught. So you're still making it clear that there are two teachers in the classroom serving the student. Okay.
Okay, is this me?
Yep. Go
Who
ahead, Helen.
should who should receive read aloud accommodations? So we're going to go through this a little quickly. I don't know why there's some confusion, but we're going to talk about it just generally. And the read aloud accommodation is really intended for a small number of students with disability. It's really designed for students who are blind or visually impaired and cannot access print. This should be generally interpreted to mean they are non-readers or at a pre-reading or emergent level. And it's not appropriate for students reading even moderately below grade level. The best advice, the best advice we can give, and I think I just had someone emailed me a question about this, would be the decision-making tool in addition to the read aloud guidance in the accommodations manual. That is most helpful. But I also want to say, even in alternate assessment, if it depends, if the student is, it's reading for comprehension, that's different. If it's reading for fluency or how well you can read, you don't have a read aloud.
Exactly.
And I don't think that's been the question in the past. I think it's more about making sure we're really providing read alouds for the students that have the most significant needs, blind, visually impaired. It's not just a couple grade levels below, the grade that they're in.
Right. Thank you, Helen. Exactly. So we wanted to just share this. We actually presented this same slide last year in office hours, but because it's come up again, we thought it was probably a good idea to share this again. So when you think about read aloud accommodations, there are two types. So there's read aloud that is an accessibility feature that is permissible for all students. Then there's the read aloud that is an accommodation. It's an accessibility feature for math, science, and social studies. And the reason for that is exactly what Helen just spoke to, because we're measuring, we're testing their math skills, their science skills, their knowledge of social studies. We're not testing their reading ability at that point. So the read aloud is an accessibility feature and any student can use it. However, when we get into the ELA test, the fact that we are testing their reading skills almost dictates that we wouldn't be able to use read aloud, except in very rare situations, because then it's not a valid measure of their reading ability. So that's how you have to think about it. And so if you think about it in those terms, are you negating the test itself, the measure of their reading ability, by providing a read aloud? That really helps you in using that decision-making tool, answer the question as to whether or not they should receive that read aloud accommodations. As Helen already said, this is intended for a very small number of students, not for students who are reading even moderately below grade level. And please note in bold print what we have at the bottom. It's a print-related disability. It has to severely limit or completely prevent the child's ability to access printed text, which means they have no decoding, or they're blind and they can't access Braille to read text. So if the student is decoding, it doesn't matter if they're decoding multiple grade levels behind. This is still not an appropriate accommodation, because then you are, as I said, negating the testing of their reading skills, which is what the test is measuring. Only between 6 and 10% of students with disabilities should be qualifying for read aloud accommodations. So this is an important thing for you to know, because you could easily do a little audit in your district to determine if you are overusing the read aloud accommodation. You can look at the number of students that you have with disabilities and the number who have that accommodation listed on the IEP. And if you're significantly above that number, then that's a good indicator to you as a director that you need to take a look at the practices within your district, because you are very likely overusing read aloud and not using in the way that it is intended. So hopefully that helps clear that up a little bit, and also gives you a little bit of a strategy to go back and see if this is an issue in your district.
Well, that went pretty fast. But now we will pause for questions. We'll leave the recording on for a few minutes. But if someone has questions and wants us to turn off the recording because they would feel more comfortable asking those questions not being recorded, we always do that. So we'll give it a few minutes for anybody that has a question that doesn't mind it being recorded, because other people may not want to hear the same question you have. And then we'll ask again if you want us to stop the recording.
Okay, so we've got a couple of hands raised, and before we have folks go ahead and ask their questions, we're just going to ask you to let us know if you're comfortable for us to keep recording, because other people might benefit from your question, or if it's something you really don't want to be captured, then we can stop. So Jennifer or Susan, both actually, and I think Erin, so we've got several hands raised.
This is Susan. My question has to do with the special ed ratings that were just released. And so I went through and I looked at all of them, and most of them say to consult your SST. What is it that they are supposed to be consulting you for? Like, a lot of them have Dispro, and some of them were evaluations not in a timely manner.
Right, and that's a great question, Susan. So if you are new to the special ed profile or the ratings, the indicators, or even if you've been doing it for a while, it can be very confusing. Everything is going to say to consult with your SST consultants.
Right.
And that simply means that if you have required action, we're here to help you. We're here to support you. So what you really want to look at is, other than for Dispro, I mean, you want to look at things that have required action. There are some things that are about improvement, but they don't necessarily carry required action in the form of a corrective action plan with them.
And that was the case with all of the ones that I
Right.
had.
Okay. So what that generally means is, as you look at those areas, you know, concerns have not risen to the level that there's any required action on your part. But what they're suggesting is that you think about and consult with your SST in how you can be proactive in improving those areas. And honestly, most of you who come to our office hours, you're in frequent contact with us. You attend the PDs and the SPED forums and all the things where we try to proactively share out information and give guidance. So you're likely already doing that. If there's a particular area of concern where you think we really need to address this, you can always reach out to us. And, you know, that's the whole reason why we have quite a catalog of PD that we offer every year, or we've got a lot of things that are online now through Canvas available for you. And it's for that very reason, to try to support you in your proactive practices to improve all of those areas before you get to the point of a corrective action. For folks who do have required actions, in terms of improvement plans or corrective action plans, when those come out in December for the new ones, because the ones that you're looking at now are still the previous ones. When those come out in December, January, whenever they fall, we make it a point to reach out to you and let you know you've got, corrective action. Or what we've done the past couple of years is we set aside a day or two where we provide instruction in whichever indicator you have corrective action in, and we provide a support day where you can come. And the last couple of years, we recorded modules, and then we had open office hours, and then individual consultants, we divide up those indicators. We reach out to you and meet with districts individually to provide additional support. So that's a great question. That's kind of how the whole process works. I hope that helps and answers for you.
It is a huge help. You answered it exactly. I appreciate it.
Great.
Great.
And thank you, Rachel. Our colleague in Sped just put in the chat that mid-December is when phase 1 will be released for the first set of indicators, and that will tell us who has required actions to complete for the coming school year. Like I said, if you're looking at things now, that's from last school year, but you'll see it'll say required action next to any item when those drop. So yeah, be thinking about in January, as I said, that's when we'll be gearing up for that season of support that we call it around indicators. And we'll be, you'll be hearing more about that at that time.
Edie, can I just add to that real quick?
Sure.
So phase 1 will be released about mid-December, and I know that's kind of a difficult time. It's usually released almost right around Christmas break, holiday
Yep.
break. It's usually the same week that holiday break is going to begin to start. So we always remind, we put a lot out in our newsletter, our weekly newsletter. We send out emails when that phase 1 of the profile is released, just to let directors know you might want to start looking at it, even, right before you go on break or right as you're going on break. Because some of the required actions do occur very quickly in January for some of the indicators, especially DisPro. When you right when you come back, you have to submit some plans and records and things like that. But like Dee Dee said, we as an SST usually will put together some type of open office hours, some type of recording, some type of presentation in early January, so that you guys have enough information about how to access your profile, where to look for those required actions, what is required as part of those actions and those improvement plans, and then how to get a hold of us so that we can be your support during that time. But I did want to just let people know that usually it's right in the middle of December that they release that. And I know this year they released it about one day before everybody went on Christmas break. So it was kind of a flurry of activity all of a sudden, and we were getting a lot of emails and things like that from directors right before Christmas. So just going to keep on your calendar to be aware of that will come out at kind of like the worst time ever. But we have no control over that. That's when it's always released, and they have not changed that.
Yeah, and we have given a lot of feedback to the state to say, please do not, can you make it earlier in December, not right before everybody goes on break and needs a break and have to think about indicators. But
Yes,
like
happy holidays, right?
Yeah, it has not happened, even though we've pleaded for several years.
But as Rachel mentioned, when you do see those, it may be a day before you leave for holiday break or winter break. But just rest assured that when you come back in January, we're on top of it, and we'll be gearing up, as I said, for that season of support. So we'll be there to help you. So thank you, ladies, for chiming in with that. I'm going to ask Erin if she wants to go ahead and pose her question.
Hi, thank you. It has been many years since we had a teacher who's never given the alternative assessment, and we know it used to be there was a mandatory training they had to go to. Are they just supposed to do the optional modules that are in the portal, or is there something else they're supposed to be doing?
No, they are to do the modules in the portal, which are put out by ODE. We can give any advice or feedback, but the modules now take the place of us. So basically, yeah, go in there and have them do the modules in the portal.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thanks. Great question. And they do get a certification for that, by the way, Erin. When they complete that, they get like a little certificate that says that they completed it, and that's a requirement if they're going to administer the AA. So yeah, Helen and I used to do training and we used to try to offer quite a few during the testing
Yes,
season,
we
but
used to go to them every year, even
yeah,
as a refresher. But
we're not doing that anymore. So the only thing that if it's needed, and we did offer it last year and no one attended, was we were prepared to do training for paper testing for individuals who were still going to do paper testing as an accommodation, but we literally didn't have anybody sign up. So we ended up not even doing that.
thank you
Okay.
both.
I think, let's see, we've got, Erin, did you have any other questions, or was that it for you?
That was all. Thank you.
Okay, great. And I know Liz has a question as well.
Real quick, back to the co-taught classrooms. I might have missed this. We do put co-teaching in our section 7 in Gen Ed, and we do have true co-teaching. Did you say we needed to put Gen Ed in support for school personnel as well, like we do for the CODAs and the PTA assistants?
Yes, ma'am. So
We put it in both.
no, not in both.
Okay.
You do not list Gen Ed under SDI. You only list
Okay.
intervention specialist under SDI. You list the
Okay.
Gen Ed teacher under support for school personnel, and then in
Gotcha.
the location box, you can put Gen Ed
Gotcha.
setting co-taught classroom.
Okay, gotcha. So they do not go in as a provider.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions, or is there anyone out there right now? I'm having trouble with the chat. I can only chat to Dee Dee. I can see participants though. Does anybody else have a question that they would prefer the recording to be turned off?
And Helen, there's nothing in the chat. Okay.
Okay, so I guess if that's it, and nobody has any other questions, we want to thank you for being here. And then we want to let you know that next month we will flip again and have it in the morning at 9 a.m. and it'll be November 2nd. And then you can register at sst8.org in the events calendar. And once again, like I said, we're so happy that you could join us today.
Right. And we will have this recording up within the next couple of days and posted on our YouTube channel and on our website. So if you need to access it to kind of refer back to anything that we talked about today, that will be available within the next few days.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.